Hello, and welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to U.S. politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective. My name is Clemencia Herrera, and I am the founder of Moira Studio, an advertising agency that works on political and advocacy campaigns that work with Latinx.
Hola, Clem. And I'm Cecilia del Cid, an environmental and social justice practitioner. I'm Latin American, an immigrant, and a community weaver working on media. Thank you.
And today we have a very, very special guest. We have here Rafael Ulloa, and he is the executive director of Tiempo Latino and Planeta, and he's joining us from Washington, D.C. Welcome. I'm very excited that you're here with us.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really great to be here and to share with you some impressions about this important topic we're talking today. And of course, I love your show, and it is really great what you're doing.
Thank you. So today we are going to be talking about a fascinating topic, at least for me. And we'll be talking about the challenges that those of us that work with the Latino community have to face when we are communicating with them. So I'm sure that Rafael has a whole book that he can write about this. As the media that you work in works directly with the Latino community. Tell us a little bit more about the media that you're working in.
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm the content director for Planeta in Boston. It's a newspaper that has been for more than 16 years in Boston, Massachusetts, and Tiempo Latino, a newspaper in DC that was founded in 1991. But I came to Tiempo Latino a little bit later in their history. So we bought Tiempo Latino in Washington, D.C. In 2017. And then I moved to D.C. I still go to Boston. I love Boston. I've been there for most of my adult life was in Boston. So I go back to the city to work with Planeta as much as I can. But we work with two different markets. And they are, I think, as you might know, because you also have a lot of Washington D.C. experience, there are two different Hispanic markets in size, demography, psychographics, everything. So we have the Boston Hispanic market that, of course, we have more people from the Caribbean, and that is a more local market where the news are more what is happening in Boston and in Massachusetts, versus we have the Washington, D.C. area market that we need to remember first. When we talk about local, we're talking about the District of Columbia, but we're talking about Virginia and Maryland. Our big states that are surrounding the small diamond that is the District of Columbia. And then we have, of course, the Salvadorian population is the main population in this market, but also the people are more, because we're in the nation's capital region, so the interest about what's happening in the national level, what decisions are being taken for the national level decisions, for example, the immigration, you talk about TPS for the Salvadorian community. So all those news are of interest for the population here. So it is, we are into the Hispanic market, in giving news to the Hispanic market, providing news to the Hispanic market, but it's very different what we do in Boston and what we do in DC in what respects to execution. Of course, our mission is always the same, right? To give information for the progress of our community.
And that was an excellent explanation of all the things that we've been talking about for the past episodes, in which the Latino community is so different, just going from one city to the other. And DC and Boston are not too far away from each other, and they're just completely different audiences that care about completely different things, and they have to be treated differently. So this was a really, really great point that you just made, and a great example of how you can't just use blanket statements, or everybody talks about this monolithic thing, the monolithic treatment of Latinos. This is just a perfect example of how nuanced Latino communities are in each part of the country. I mean, and this is just, this is the East Coast, and then imagine what would it be, having a newspaper in Texas or having a newspaper in Arizona or California. It's so different.
Exactly. And sometimes what you mentioned, Clement, about the monolithic and the way to think of the Hispanic community in the U.S. as one, probably comes for the power in numbers, right? We have the Mexican population in the U.S. is the biggest population probably with respect to Latinos. So of course, if you are a national network or you're a national publication, and you need to bet on one population, probably you will go with the Mexican population because it's the largest one. But as we know, they are still minorities when we talk about the Hispanic community in Massachusetts or in the DC region. It's growing, but still compared to other nationalities like Puerto Ricans or Dominicans, for instance, in the Massachusetts area, or Salvadorans and other Central American nationals, or Peruvians or Bolivians in the DC area, the Mexican population is smaller in these areas.
That's right. So tell us a little bit about what kind of media do you guys use to communicate to Latinos, the reach that you guys have, and maybe, what has worked lately to communicate with them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question, because I think we all know, and it's not a secret, that we all need to be in the digital world, right? Like the paper, we are a newspaper, we are born as a newspaper in print, and we are still a newspaper in print that publish weekly. In both markets we publish our print newspaper. We're still there in the streets, like reaching the community, but we know we also need to be in the digital realm. So and what I want to say this, because during the pandemic, like both the print paper and the online both became even more relevant in different ways. You will ask, why the print? Well, there was, I think, like a big reveal that many Latinos don't have internet, high-speed internet, or they have access to it probably when they are working in their shift at the restaurant, library, you name it, where they access to it with a free Wi-Fi or like their employer Wi-Fi. But they don't have a plan that has a high-speed internet, or they have a limited data plan where they don't have access to browse all day stuff, like, so they need to be careful with how many gigas they use in their plan. So that's something that the pandemic, like, it was brought to the surface through the pandemic, because when people were sent home and they couldn't go to their work, or they couldn't go to school, or they couldn't just go out because we needed to be careful and we needed to stay in as much as possible. That was the message that was sent by the cities, and was the right message, by the way, to be careful in those first months when we didn't know what was happening. So where did they have access to internet? Nowhere. So the print paper became a way for the Latino community to connect with the news. So the print paper, an analog media, they could take it anywhere. They didn't need to pay anything. It's a free paper. So it's totally, the old school thing became the new school again. The old cool became the new cool. So the paper was, the star, and became an essential item. We started delivering the papers both in Washington, D.C. and in Boston to the strategic places, because we needed to change also how to deliver the paper to places where people could go, so the places were still open. So we were delivering the papers to the food drives, for example. Many Latino families, as we know, were in need of receiving essential items and food during these very hard months of the pandemic. So you had your bread, you had your milk, you had your eggs, and you have a copy of El Planeta in your box. So it became an essential item. You have that on one side. So the print became super relevant for the Hispanic community, and we found that we needed to give a lot of information to our audience during this month, and the print was a very good way to reach, especially many of the vulnerable population in neighborhoods, for the people who are in Massachusetts, for instance, Chelsea, or for the people who are in know the DC area or Maryland area, Langley Park, a community that is a community where people really need a lot of help, and they're struggling every day. So that's for the paper. Then online, of course, right? Like it's not a secret that online is the way to grow, and we figure out that there was also a lot of need of information for COVID in the online realm. You had like a lot of fake news going on in the social media, a lot of like crazy stuff about COVID, and later with the vaccination too going on in Facebook. So what worked for us was Facebook. That's a good. That might surprise younger people, right? Because they say Facebook is going out of like fashion, and it's for like their parents or like grandparents. So, but in the Latino community, Facebook is still very popular. It's the most popular social media as of now, as of today. I don't know what will happen in next year, but today I can tell you it's still the most popular social media for Latinos. That goes across generations, I think. Like, of course, younger people might use more TikTok or Instagram, but still Facebook is used by the younger Latinos because they can communicate with their grandparents that are like abroad, and they see the pictures, and they get groups and stuff like that. So Facebook is still very popular. We started doing a lot of Facebook Lives. We became like the way I describe it is we became like a newscast basically for a month and a half when the pandemic was beginning, and where there were like when it was very hard to find information, especially in Spanish, about the COVID-19. So we were the ones interviewing doctors from the MGH, from the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, scientific researchers working in the Massachusetts area, or in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We were interviewing politicians who wanted to give their message to the community, officers who were like talking about safety, a little bit of everything, but everything was new. So it was, we could have like a newscast, kind of an hour per day, a Facebook Live from Monday through Friday for a month and a half. Then later, when the news, when we knew what was the enemy, and the COVID was like something like most people knew what they were facing and what to do and what not to do, like we could decrease the frequency. But that month, I would say the beginning, when the emergency started in middle of March or end of March until whole month of April, was intense. A lot of like Facebook Live that connect well with the community. We had a big audience. And then like we've been doing that. We do newsletters. We do like 3 newsletters, in 4 newsletters in our markets. In Boston, we have the Planeta Daily. That is a daily newsletter that communicates, that brings news to the audience about local stuff. Then we have a health newsletter that started like during the emergency of the COVID, because we figure out like people want to keep receiving information about health, not only COVID but everything else. We have a political newsletter called Tiempo that it comes from DC, but we want to reach people in the national level who are interested in news in Spanish and analysis in Spanish of what is happening in the nation's capital. We have a national newsletter called National AM Nacional that brings national news of what's happening. So we have those newsletters, plus the social media, plus reinforcing our online strategy for our website, redesigning our website to work better on cell phones, on smartphones, and all that. That we found was a good way to communicate with the community that we needed to reinforce, and it grew a lot during our numbers went up during the pandemic in visits, page views, impressions, and all that. So those are 2 in the print and online. That's what it has worked.
What an interesting pivot that you guys have had. And have you guys used WhatsApp at all to communicate with Latinos? Because I know that WhatsApp is also huge, as well as Facebook.
Yes. No, you're right. WhatsApp is also huge, and it's also huge for misinformation.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, how are you making how is WhatsApp or some of these networks kind of, increasing, decreasing, affecting sharing of accurate information, or how are you addressing or cutting Like,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like, we are like telling people to be careful with WhatsApp. Like, always when we do a Facebook Live or an interview with like an expert, I think like we always try to bring the message of be careful what the neighbor says or the cousin of the cousin or the WhatsApp, like the grandmother
Yeah.
sending WhatsApp. So like in a little bit like making fun of that, but also telling people, hey, just be careful. We try to send a message. But what we're doing, we have a WhatsApp group for El Planeta that is for news. So we send, we're telling people subscribe to this group with your phone number, and then you will receive trusted information from El Planeta Media through WhatsApp. So that's what we're doing. But I mean, like I don't have an answer of like how to avoid the WhatsApp. I mean, my parents are like receiving a lot of WhatsApp stuff, and they ask me, "Hey, I heard
Yeah.
this." I say, "No, that's where did it come from? Is it Washington Post? Is it New York Times? Is it El País de España? I mean, like, is no, if it is just an unknown source because it came from WhatsApp doesn't mean it's true. I think it's like for older generations. They believe WhatsApp is like a medium of information, right? Because they didn't grow up with WhatsApp. They for them is whatever they receive there. They might think is something that it is certified. So I think that could be part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they get it from someone that they trust, right? If they
Yeah.
get it from their siblings or from, their friends or, a family member, they might tend to believe that it's true. And you don't know where that person got it from. But so this is a really interesting way to maybe segue about like how information spreads in the Latino community that is so different from other communities or like the white Americans, because like this is like a trust system, right? There's like the word of mouth is so strong, and they trust each other, so it's like any rumor could get amplified into truth, right? And then it becomes truth because somebody that I trust has said that to me. So do you got some insight? Do you have some insight around that?
No, exactly. I mean, like what you say is just exactly what happens. People. And you gave an example of what could happen when like the wrong information goes through a person you might know, right? Like you say, like your sister sent you like this. WhatsApp that says this drug that veterinarians use for horses is good for you and to prevent COVID or whatever. So you might trust it because your sister. But I would say you can use. I mean, companies, organizations can use the same principle for doing good and getting their message across to the community. Example, a hospital that might use a Latino doctor or a doctor who is well known in the Latino communities. For example, if the MGH, they have a Chelsea branch like inside the town, and they know the Latinos go there and they have doctors there who are trusted by the community. So why not using those doctors to spread the message about like what people need to do about prevention, about like medical checkups, yearly checkups, about vaccination. So that's a way to use that power of like someone someone you trust, an authority, to give like the right information and to take your message or your brand to the community.
Yeah, using the real doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of many family members of mine would ask me because I worked in the media. They were like, "Is this true?" It's like it doesn't have any logos on it. The doctors are not really identifying themselves as anything, or if they do, then if you look them up, they're nowhere to be found, and it's like their name doesn't appear in anything. And it's like if there's a doctor out there, there something comes up on Google, like the hospital has their name on it or whatever. But it's like there's so many. But the thing is like, who has the time to go out and research, right? They don't have the time, or they don't have the knowledge. Like how do I go out and research things?
Yeah, it's not part of I would say it's part of people who are more familiar with the digital age. You Google everything, right? But some people don't. Like they just didn't grow up with that, with Googling things. So they receive something, they just assume it is real.
But I also think that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that there is also a level of media that is recognized, that it spreads a lot of half information, misinformation, and that the community, the Latino community, might say, well, but I saw it in a good newspaper. I think, and I think there's also, when at the very beginning, for example, with COVID, when the information was changing consistently, people felt like, well, they said one thing first and then they say another thing. I don't know who to trust. Right. And it's that the information is developing so rapidly, and it was something so new that what we thought was happening in the beginning was not what we needed to happen when we knew more. But I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel when, do you feel like Latinos from, there is other newscasts, like places we know that there is like media that tends into one direction and another direction politically, and things can be twisted and turned around. How are Latinos? What are some of the things that the newspapers that you work with have done to like build this trust, to kind of create this like neutrality or like unbiased presence? Or because I feel like a lot of the times, at least from my family or from communities, like, how do you know which one to trust? There's so many out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I guess part of that trust that any media company or any outlet earns, it's been there in the community. So they know your reporters. People know like your reporters. People know like you are in the streets. People know that you are there in their meetings. So that's one way. Like I think like a good outlet will earn the trust of the community. So that's number one. I think, of course, that you mentioned the example of some paper that didn't verify information or like publish something, I would say too optimistic or too pessimistic, just to probably generate clickbait or like pick up rates in the. So that's also something that you should avoid, because I saw a newspaper, like I wouldn't say a name, but I saw a newspaper in some area that published something like the cure for COVID is here, something like that. I mean, if I have a family with COVID, or I am with COVID, like that would be super, a good news for me if I read that. And then when I read the whole story, I would be very disappointed to know that it was an experimental drug and it wasn't a cure, obviously, and it was just something that might improve people with COVID outcomes. But you cannot do that, especially in a print paper, and especially with things changing, because if you really honestly, if it was an honest mistake because you believe that was a cure, because that was information that arrived to you, you need to know that if you put that on print, it's there. So you cannot take back a printed paper, so it will be there for at least a week or more when the paper is out. But you need to be very careful with that. Online, you can do corrections and you can update, but not on print. So you need to be very careful with that. I think it will depend on how to earn trust will be like be in the community, be part of your community. Hire people who will be part of your community, who will be known by your community, who they can call and tell them, hey, come here to cover this is happening, and then like be very professional with what you write. About the neutrality, I think like you need to listen to both sides. Obviously, you need to report what's going on both sides, and I think like we all strive to do that, and I think like in more or less people have doing that. We by the way, we feel very it's a very delicate situation, because we're a community paper, so you kind of you need to advise the basic things, right? Like wear your mask. I mean, I feel totally comfortable telling people that wear your mask when especially when the masks were like a new thing and there was a lot of hesitancy, but I needed to like contain. I cannot be like regañar a la comunidad, right? Like, hey, because even though I sometimes feel like I want to do that, I need to be a little bit, hey, I need to separate, we are new, let the doctor, like, get angry with the community who is not like following the rules and tell them what to do. The same with the vaccination, right? Like, even though I personally believe that we all need to get vaccinated, I feel like the El Tiempo Latino or El Planeta are not the ones who should tell you to get the vaccine, but we need to like showcase doctors who will tell you to get the vaccine. We need to showcase priests or like pastors who will tell you to get the vaccine. We need to showcase community leaders, athletes, anyone who is like people look up to in the community, to them telling you to get the vaccine. So that's what we're trying to do, channeling those positive voices. And hey, what happened with the other voices? You would say the ones who say don't get vaccinated. We have reported them too. In the sense of like we say, hey, like these people are not getting vaccinated because this and that, but I would say like they are reported, but obviously I would try to give more voice to the positive, like the people who are saying like the right things. It's a little bit hard because
yes,
there should be a balance, but not because of that you will give a cover to the crazy guys who are like saying like
absolutely.
Don't mask up and like getting a mask is like it goes against my personal freedom or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
You bring up a great point of the messenger is so important when communicating with Latinos and trusted people. Like, I remember like back in Latin America when we were watching commercials back in the 80s, 90s, it was all like, telenovela stars that they would hire them to like sell, toothpaste and whatever, because it was like they know that Latinos really trust, people that they, either people that work in the community or people that they know has clout, and so really choosing the right messenger is so important when communicating, and sometimes it's even more important than the message itself. It's like, immediately if somebody is recognized on a video or, on the radio or whatever, and they're just like, oh, I know that person.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even like, I know that the person is, neutral or whatever. I just like, oh, there's this person. I know that person. I've seen them on TV, so they are trustworthy.
Exactly. And what surprises me that let's go to different different topics, not only health or COVID, but it surprises me that companies, some are doing a good job in that aspect of getting like people who speak Spanish or who are Latinos and can communicate with the community better. But some companies don't have anyone, so like they approach you for a story, and then like you tell them like, yeah, it will be great to talk with someone who is Latino in the organization and who can tell what you guys are doing for the Latino community or what you want to do with the Latino community. Say, oh, we don't have anyone. So yeah, it's still like I think like things are changing for sure, but I think still like there are many companies that are not prepared. That they might be having good plans or they might want to reach their community, but they are not prepared yet.
So you still find organizations that don't have a lot of staff that is Latino or like that belongs to the community?
Yeah, we have deal with many organizations that are still in that stage, and others that are amazing. That they know like the community is important. They know it's a win-win because even though they are doing something for the community, they are getting a lot of business from our community. Yeah. So they have developed like a whole strategy where they have hired like experts who are advertising, PR, marketing, or community relations, who know how to work with the Hispanic market, and they are experts in creating relationships. So they establish right away a good relationship with us. They have everything we need, which helps a lot when you are in a busy schedule, like full of deadlines. They say, oh, we have this in Spanish. Oh, we have like someone in Spanish who can talk next hour. So they have everything. So those are good examples of how to reach the Hispanic community.
I have another question. Do you think that it's important for the community, like you were saying, how different of the cities have different sectors of the Latinx community, like Spanish speakers. Do they care, like, in California, do they care that people have different accents or how you write in certain levels of Spanish? Does that matter or doesn't matter? Or like you can use like a standard kind of trying to be as as neutral in accents and stuff. Does that matter? Do Latinos have are looking for music identification, cultural like symbolism? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I would say as a media, as newspapers, we try to be neutral in our Spanish, in a way that neutral, but also we're conscious that we're in the U.S. So, for example, sometimes we know there are agencies of the government that people they say the ICE viene, ¿verdad? O la migra, or they have nicknames, but sometimes it's in English too, like ICE. Yes. Instead of the super long name of Agencia de Aduana y Inmigración.
Yeah, and nobody's gonna recognize that name.
So yeah, we sometimes exactly. Sometimes we take liberties sometimes to use some of the names that people refer to in English, but then the Spanish we use is pretty neutral. And why would I, for a publication, if you're a newspaper, you're a blog, you're a website, you create content, I would say keep neutral, or you have a radio show, keep neutral Spanish if you want to reach the community, because neutral Spanish will not really make anyone confused. But then what about if you are doing a show for the Salvadoran community? Then it's the opposite. Use someone from Salvador who knows about the slang and the words they use. So I would say it depends on where you're going. But if you're you're a brand, or you want to get the wider amount of people, or you're a media, I think you should use the neutral Spanish, which will be more accepted and widespread.
Excellent. Thank you.
I wanna just take the next 5 minutes because we're running out of time, and for our final question.
Sure.
Why, in your opinion, I know that you guys have pivoted, over COVID, and there's that, maybe print that has been more popular because of this situation or circumstances that Latinos are going through, and Wi-Fi and all that stuff. But what do you think is the next best thing, either in media placement or in, sort of the communications style, or what do you think is what's coming next in when communicating with Latinos?
Yeah, I think what we're doing now, I think the blogs are becoming super big in the Latino community, and I think it's compared to the English speaking community, there's still a lot of field to innovate in the Spanish speaking blogs. I don't know. I don't remember the numbers. I was with someone from NPR that they are the experts in doing audio, right, or radio content. So they were saying during the pandemic, of course, the audio it grew for amazing growth. So as you know, the Clubhouse and the podcasts and all that, but they were saying most Latinos consume their podcast. Guess where?
Where?
YouTube. So it's not you would imagine you go to your phone and get your favorite podcast, Apple or Spotify. No, most Latinos, they were saying they listen to their podcast in YouTube, and many of those podcasts are not even something we're doing now with videos. It's if they are talking about let's say nutrition, it's a static picture of a tomato, and then there's the audio over that picture that talks about nutrition. So, but a lot of Latinos are consuming their podcast via YouTube, and it's growing like crazy. So I think that is something people who are looking to reach the Hispanic community should consider to do content via audio, a podcast style. That's something that is probably I don't know the next big thing, but it's something that is already here, but that is growing.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you so much. Any questions, Ceci? The last minute questions?
Thank you. No, thank you so
Yeah.
much. I would have never I would have never guessed YouTube, especially for audio, because I always associate YouTube with something like you will get like videos, short videos, whenever you need like a demonstration of something more visual. But I also appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been really nice to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Rafael. This was very insightful. And everyone, we're going to have Rafael back for another episode in which we're going to talk about something very touchy subject, which is whether we should talk to Latinos in Spanish or in English. So it's gonna be that one's gonna be very interesting and fun, and looking forward to talking about that some more. Thank you so much, everyone, and please send us emails, follow us on social at LatinXYZ Pod, and let us know what you think. Let us know if you want us to cover any more topics, if you want Rafael back to talk about more stuff.
Or if you don't want me back, also
No, gracias.
We won't listen to those.
No. That's one.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And see you next time.
Gracias.